Hello, and just to let you know that I'm doing another podcast, another update. So, welcome. It's the 16th, and we're just a few days before things get incredibly exciting. And I was hoping to do an update a bit earlier, but the people that I needed to speak to were not available. Sometimes when these people go into a meeting, they are required to leave their cell phones, their mobile phones, at the desk. They'll go and have their meeting, and then they will then come out and pick their phones up some hours later. There is one location that I'm aware of where they can keep their phones because this facility or this room is so special that there are absolutely no electronic communications can penetrate in or penetrate out. But the result is the same, that I'll have 5, 6, 7 hours of no communication with that particular group. And so what had happened is I'd had a call saying, which I think came in at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning UK time, and it just simply said, right, call me, doesn't matter what time, just call me. And I did, but unfortunately the person's cell phone was off, so they were in another meeting. I have had that conversation. That conversation finally took place last night. So I want to talk to you about that, and I also want to talk to you a little bit about some of this stuff that's going around on the internet regarding that Biden will somehow be sworn in on the 20th. It's going to be allowed, and it's all good and all the rest of it. And that's making some headway in terms of it's getting a lot, obviously quite correctly in my view, it's getting a lot of attacks, but it's being debated, and I wanted to give you the information I have and what that's about. So again, in no particular order, just as the way it comes out, here we go with it. I don't believe that President Trump will go to Mar-a-Lago. I think that that's what the media are being shown, and I think the unawake and unaware are being shown that. I do believe he'll go to Texas. If you look at the pictures that mainstream are carrying, then it's literally 4 years worth of boxes of the New York Post and the New York Times, all strategically, theatrically laid out for them to take a picture of. One photograph of Trump and Chinese president in a meeting, rather obviously carried so the picture outwards so everyone could see that, a bust of some character from history, and a few other bits and bobs. Talk about theatre and stage managing, but that's interesting. On Friday, Biden was not going to go for his rehearsal for the inauguration. That was cancelled, and then on coming Monday, Biden was is slated to go in and do some rehearsing, and that's been cancelled as well. Isn't that interesting? So I don't really know how this guy is going to learn his words if he's not really going to go in and have a practice. I think that's some key points there. All right, what I know what everybody wants, and I've said to the people I talk to, what the situation is, and they've said quite clearly that we can't afford our timeline, our planning to be directed or influenced by millions of people who want an answer now. The people who we would call white hats, they are good people, and they do understand. Of course they do, because they mix with ordinary people. Actually, they understand the need and they understand what's going on, but they're the ones who are playing this game, not you, not I. They're the ones who have to make the decisions, and if they did what you and I wanted, it might really sabotage the whole of their plan. So they're not going to do that, but they are aware and they are sympathetic to the real need that people want something to happen. And again and again and again, what they tell me is, you must tell people to be patient. You must tell people to be calm. Just tell them that President Trump has not done 4 years in the White House and taken all of the horrible things he's taken just to be tricked by a cheated election. It's widely believed now in the top circles. I remember the top circles don't all have access to the same information. It's on a compartmentalized need-to-know basis. But basically, the top tier now believe that President Trump secured something like 75% of the entire vote in 2020. It's also believed that President Trump flipped California, that California actually went Republican. And now, who in their right minds, and I believe President Trump is in his right mind, no matter what the majority House Speaker says, who in their right minds would actually then say, right, okay, I've done this job for 4 years, I've been completely cheated and robbed of this election, I'll just go quietly. No, he would never have lasted the length he has lasted. And the media are saying that Trump has conceded. No, he has not. President Trump has not conceded. If President Trump had conceded, he would have made it known that he was going to go to the inauguration. Okay, he's not conceded. Right. Now then, what is the potentiality? The information that I had, hello dog, come on then, come and say hello. The information that I had was that we should expect something any time from tomorrow, Sunday onwards. Now, unfortunately, that's quite a big time scale. But that was the initial one that I had, and I only got it from one person, and I wasn't going to go public with it. Firstly, because I'd only got it from one person, not the top person, but in that. And secondly, you know, we weren't there. This is on Friday. It wasn't Sunday or Monday. So here's my understanding. The people that I've spoken to last night, Friday night, have said that it is their understanding that action will be taken before the 20th. It is unlikely to go beyond that. But here's where some of this talk about Biden having an inauguration has come from. It is believed that there's a real possibility for the people behind Biden to create a CGI stroke analog reality. In other words, perhaps in one of the rooms in SCOTUS, remember that Chief Justice Roberts is not our favourite cup of tea here in Great Britain, or your cup of coffee in America. So maybe one of those rooms could be used. Maybe a completely CGI'd backdrop. We know that Tom Hanks, part of the club, wants to come and do some sort of introductions and be the presenter and the compere and do all this stuff. And so the people I spoke to said there is a real possibility that mainstream media may carry an illegal inauguration. So that's where I think all this talk about Biden's going to go in and be inaugurated. That's where I think it's coming from. Now, let's just say, and it's not my understanding, I'm only now addressing some of the things that people are talking about. So it's not my understanding, but I'm only just putting my point of view across based on what I've heard others saying about Biden. Let us just assume there is this, which is quite possible, this CGI fake inauguration in not the White House, because he's never going to get in there, not the Congress, because you know that's not going to happen. So some studio somewhere or some room in the Supreme Court where it's all done. What is the point of that? I mean, I asked that question. I said, if that was to happen, and you guys know that there's a fake inauguration going on, what benefit is there to the people, to you? What is there out of it? Now, they were very cagey on that, and I understand that because I'm on an open line. I've not secured my end, but they're secure their end, which means it can be hacked this end. So they're always very, very careful. But the point was, and I hadn't anticipated, and I hadn't even thought about it, was that the world sees this fake inauguration. Oh, and by the way, I said, don't you think people are going to know it's fake? Don't you think we'll see it? And the person on the other end of the phone said to me, well, you think so? And we talked about 9/11 and how well that was orchestrated and so many other things. And yeah, the media working with what we call the bad guys do have the ability to present a action that seems so real that many people will buy into it. But regardless of that, so the media then will show this, if this is what occurs, this fake broadcast by the media, and then it will show Biden driving up to the White House and being refused entry. And this is what I think the good guys actually looking forward to, actually being refused entry into the White House and being turned away, which is unheard of. Unheard of. And the other thing was that I said, look, if this does go ahead and they produce this fake inauguration through the media, CGI, trick photography, etc., what are you guys going to do? Are you going to take it down halfway? And they said, no, we'll let that go through if that's what happens, if that gets to that point, and we want to see Biden turned away at the White House gates. And then within 12 hours, that's exactly the figure I was given, within 12 hours of that broadcast, that allows us to take down all of mainstream media just based on the fact that they carried an illegal inauguration. They've said they've got plenty enough to take them down anyway, but that's something that some people in the decision-making circle find quite humorous and quite interesting. I personally said I don't want to see it get that far. My membership at Connecting Consciousness don't want to see it get that far. I can't speak for the people of the world, but if I ever did in any shape or format, the good people wouldn't want it to get that far. And I'm sure that actually is the right point. And then this person I was speaking to reiterated, came back to me and said, look, I don't think it's going to get that far either. But if the bad side were able to get out somehow this fake electronic inauguration, which then mainstream media carried, then we would deal with that, as a separate thing. So that's where that's coming from, I believe, about all this talk about Biden having an inauguration. I don't believe that Biden will go to the Congress or any of the Capitol Hill buildings. And you know why? Because the media are talking about 15,000 National Guard. I ran that figure. I never believed the media at all. And that wasn't confirming with what I'd heard elsewhere. And I ran this through with an American contact, and I was told it's not 15,000. Get this right. It's 21,421, something like that. So it's 21,400 and something. It's not 15,000. There's a lot more than the media are either allowing or being told. And a lot of the view is, why would a bunch of criminals, that's, these people, why would a bunch of criminals go where there's 21,000 soldiers who are very loyal to the Republic, to the Constitution, and to the president, the real president, by the way, which is Donald Trump? Why would they go in there and have 21,000 soldiers around them and maybe never get out again? So that's the reason they probably won't go to Capitol Hill, and they'll do it in some back alley, in some studio, or maybe the Supreme Court. Apart from two justices in the Supreme Court, I think the rest of those justices are, they're not going to be looking too good. All right, so then this conversation developed, and I said, look, excuse me, I'm never happy with 10 days of darkness. I don't like that term. That is a fear-mongering term, and it sounds like the bad guys are producing 10 days of darkness, and I resent that type of thing. I'm not going to have it. And I've always called this 10 days of no communication, a much better term, 10 days of no communication. And I asked specifically for the United Kingdom, I asked my contact, what do you see in the United Kingdom? And the reply was, well, you guys are actually going to get away quite lightly. You might have 7 days, 5 to 7 days of disruption. But also the contact said to me that probably there is some cleanup operation needed in Britain, and that will come interestingly last, but 5 to 7 days. You guys might get away with it quite lightly. Other countries might see more prolonged periods. There is no real substantive reason why power outages should be long held anywhere. There really isn't. If there are power outages as part of an operation by the White Hats, they are very aware that, that these are ordinary people who are suffering, and they will keep it to a minimum. So don't believe that's going to be too horrific. What will be horrific for anyone under the age of 30, maybe it's 40 now, I don't know, is the loss of their cell phones or their mobile phones. That is slated to go down, as is television. We've moved on from a sort of a electronic lockdown over the United States to much more of a global lockdown. I don't think every country in the world, but there will be many countries in the world. And what I was told, and I'll just give you the words, is if you put your television on, no matter where you tune it to, depending on your particular operation in your country, it will either automatically default back to one channel coming from America, or all the other channels just don't exist and there's only going to be one broadcast channel. And what they're talking about is live courts martials being screened over 7 days or 10 days, testimonies being on a loop, so people who have decided to buy their freedom or part freedom by being open and honest, consenting to having their confession filmed, and that then being shown to the world. So all the people that we really want to wake up and show the truth and show that we're not all crazy, that we believe this and we're not all mad, they will actually have it in their face. That's a big part of all of this. Maybe just soldiers in certain parts of America, not the whole part of America, the East Coast perhaps, and the West Coast perhaps. Now, what is interesting here in Great Britain or United Kingdom, England specifically, using the COVID virus as the reason, the Prime Minister of Britain has basically put the United Kingdom into a semi-lockdown as people going out and coming in. So now if you come to Britain from Monday, hello darling, you must actually have had a DNA test to show that you're free of the virus. You must, and it will be checked, have an address to go to, and then you must have another test 5 days or 6 days later. And there's a heavy fine if you don't. In other words, it's going to be enforced. And the point here is that DNA material is taken. So don't look on this as a bad thing. If anyone tries to put something up your nose, don't accept that. In my opinion, it's better not to fly than have a swab stuck right up your nose. They could just do this area here. If they want to push it up here, my advice is no thank you, you're not going to do that to me. And so there is now becoming an air corridor lockdown. And I do understand that Britain is going to be one of the last countries that will have any action taken. So I understand lots of people are hugely frustrated. It's getting more and more fraught and desperate as we get towards this date. But look at what's happening. Look at the mainstream media. Look at how it's not being portrayed as a normal transition. Those of you old enough to think about Obama and Clinton, I remember Bush and Reagan. Think about those transitions. And look how the media were doing this and doing that, and how the incoming president was doing this or doing that, and compare it to what is occurring. And, I believe there are an awful lot of bad people in positions of power who, if they don't know what's coming to them, have a pretty good guess. And you think that it's always been him, meaning Trump, him or them. One of the two sides and only one of the two sides can cut the finishing tape and come through the other side. And if I said to you it's a fight to the death, I don't mean it literally like that. What I mean is it is a fight for existence of a way of life. And both sides, and they've got to recognize that the bad guys have their way of life. Their way of life, which is so important to them, which is basically, they are the lords and masters, and all the rest of us are just the humble servants that go around doing what they want. That's their way of life. And it's a straight fight. It's a straight fight. Don't sit on the fence anymore, people. There's no grey area. You're either on one side or you're on the other side. And what we are playing out is this final battle. And the spear point for the bad guys is the media. That is their major weapon of choice, because it's their only now weapon of choice. I've said many times before that the biological weapon was used by the bad guys. I've talked before, 3 years ago, when Special Ops went in and recovered the first, to my knowledge, the first attempt, it may not have been, but to me it was the first attempt to release a virus in the United States as part of a China operation to destroy America, certainly to destroy President Trump. That failed. And then we had this recent one, which also semi-failed, because during the struggle, it was released in China. If you are making a virus in your country, the last thing you want is to release that self-same virus in your country, not least because it's traced back. Well, it would be under normal circumstances, but because China is so much in control, they've been able to influence all the other organizations that would normally have, traced it back to them. So China never ever wanted that virus released in their own country. Who would? The plan was that it would be smuggled out, and it was so virulent and so powerful in terms of its ability to infect. It's very, very contagious. That only a small amount was needed, but also there was a possibility of taking that amount and then seeing if they could replicate it and make more of it. And that went wrong, and it was broken and lost in China. So this is just another phase of a deep-seated hatred against the president and what he stands for. It's not about Democrat and Republican. This is literally about good and evil. You could say it's Satan and God, but we just generally say it's between those that are fundamentally good people and those that are fundamentally evil. When we hear through the back channels of the evil that are done to ordinary people and younger people, and you think you'd have to be insane to do some of these crazy things, these evil things, these diabolical things. You'd have to be insane. And I actually say they're not insane, they're just Satanists. That's what they are. They're Satanists. And that's the two-way of life, the normal life that we aspire to and we recognize, and a satanic way of life, which for too long now has dominated Hollywood, too long now has dominated all forms of entertainment, too long now has dominated advertising and cinema and on television, too long now has begun to creep in to non-entertainment industries. And so that's what's being fought for here. And if anybody would think that President Trump and the people around him, after this long struggle, which goes back at least to 1963, in fact it goes back to the president before him, who talked about the industrial military complex. Now of course we can take the military out of it, which is great, but it goes right back. So anybody thinks that at this timeline of human history, the good guys are going to say, yeah, okay, they beat us, they tricked like hell, we got 75% of the vote, but you know what, we've been beaten, and we'll just go away, and maybe in 4 years' time we'll come back. That's what the main media will tell you, that's what they'll do, is that the good guys will try and come back in 4 years. The good guys know there'll be no America in 4 years' time if they do that. Not as we understand it anyway. And they're not going to do that. They haven't come this far just to do nothing and to go quietly away into the corner. That's not what's scheduled, okay? But I appreciate that the closer we get to it, the more energy is produced and the more we feel that. And all I can tell you is what I've been told, which is we have a plan we're working to. We've got several, but we're working on an overall plan, and we cannot afford to be pushed by people who are desperately making a lot of noise because they want to be justified. They want to see that they were right. They want to tell their neighbors or their brothers or their sisters or their mothers, fathers, that they were right. It will happen. It will happen. So there was a very useful conversation, and again I'll come back to the point that I want to keep hammering home, is that the people I've spoken to have made it very clear that they don't think it will get that far to the bad guys putting out a fake holographic or CGI mocked up in the back of some room. They don't think it will get that far. They believe they can do everything before that. But if for any reason they can't, then there will be entertainment to see the cavalcade of beat up old cars, because Biden's not had access to anything really. So it'll be cars that Hollywood stars have lent them or big bankers have lent them, and they're going to drive up and not be given entrance into the White House. And I think it's just about that. Now, I've said, yeah, but look, the media are not going to cover that. They won't show that. So there's the vision and the view of those planning the operation, and there's what we, the ordinary people, actually want to happen. And I've said it can't come soon enough. It can't come soon enough. Let's have it now, this very minute. But I'm not making the plans. I receive some information and then I pass on to you. So that's what I wanted to talk about. There's not much else we can do. We have to wait. What else can we do? Okay. President Trump does not want his supporters out on the streets with guns, because although it sounds a bit difficult, you're actually going to get in the way. I think that they feel they've got it so well controlled, they don't need a mass revolution of the people. That's not what's required. They do believe the best thing that the supporters can do is just sit tight and do what you've always done, which is trust your president. You've trusted him. And if we look back on the 4 years, it hasn't actually let you down. Let's not get into party politics, but if we look at what's been achieved in those 4 years under the most trying circumstances, that man, President Trump, achieved more in these last 4 years than any president who had the whole machinery helping him. That's the incredible thing, that what this president has achieved, even with everything almost working against him, is astonishing. It is astonishing. And there's so much truth got to come out. Let's just hope that there's something about him and what he's achieved, rather than focusing on this person's going to jail or that person's going to do this, that, and the other. We just need to remember that this is one individual that the Americans voted in, and the evidence that I was shown, it was only a small amount of evidence, was that in the 16 election they did do exactly the same thing, but they totally misunderstood the support the president had. So all the Dominion machines, all the type of machines, and all the fake voting was done to get Hillary in. And that's why Hillary was so confident that she would win. But they underestimated the huge amount of support for Trump. So when we came around to 2020, they had two plans: the algorithmic plan and then a fallback plan, because they weren't going to be caught out again as they were with Hillary. So again, this time the tide of support for Trump was even bigger than 2016, and it swamped the algorithm that the computers were running. And that's when this Leonardo satellites were communicating backwards and forwards, and they desperately had to move these votes from warehouses, sometimes as far away as New York, for heaven's sake, or California. Hence the stopping of the voting, and get these things trucked in, bust in, get them out. And this was their fallback position, and it was because that they learnt the support for Trump was so great, and that's how they did the plan. Now, you would honestly ask, well, if Trump and team knew all about this in the first election, why didn't they do something in the second? They didn't want to talk the subject up because they wanted these people to do exactly what they did. These bad actors did exactly what they were expected to do. And had Trump gone in 2017 and cleared it out, they wouldn't have had a government left. They wouldn't have had an operation. Now, 4 years later, they are ready to take out 75%, maybe 80% of the entire government, and they've got enough, probably just enough, but enough to go in, sworn in, very emergency, and run the show. So both sides have planned. Here's the point. Both sides have planned, but what the good sides have done is they've seen ahead. So a game of checkers or a game of chess, one side can see 2 moves ahead and one side can see 3 moves ahead, and the good guys are seeing 3 moves ahead. And so what is playing out is what is meant to play out. And I know people get frustrated and cross, and what can I do about it? I can only tell you what I am told, and I will only tell you what I believe to be true. And if I don't get confirmation of it from most sources, I won't even tell you. But last night was the one phone call with people that I don't need confirmation from, because I know it's true. So there we go. Anytime between Sunday and the day itself, we should expect something. Okay? All right. Thank you. I'm not doom and gloomer, but if you have got a box with some tins of food and a few gallons or liters, if you're a European, of water, you don't need loads and loads and loads. Those of you who are preppers, yeah, you've got 6 months worth, so you're fine. But those of you who don't have much money, you're able to do that. Just get something in case you're like, I don't know, a day without electricity or something like that. Just be safe rather than sorry. Now, hello, Doc. What I wanted to also talk about was a change in the financial system. When the president, there's only one president, remember, President Trump, when the president says there's a smooth transfer of power, he's giving you 2 messages. One is it's transferring from him to him. And I know a lot of people got cross when I talked about Lieutenant General Flynn. Oh, you're telling Lieutenant General Flynn what to do, and people really don't like that. Well, I'm sorry, it's too bad, it's tough, because what I've been told is that Lieutenant General Flynn will be offered the position of Vice President in a new Trump administration if he wants it, and if he doesn't, he'll be offered another government position. And if John F. Kennedy Jr. is alive, he will go around from state to state, healing, holding open air meetings, private meetings, bringing church men and women together with people, talking to local governments, senates, the lot. So if John F. Kennedy Jr. is alive, his job, after all of this, after the guns have been put back in their racks, his job is to actually go out there and heal the country, and then in 4 years' time he will stand as President of the United States. Okay, so there you go. That's something you won't hear anywhere else. In terms of the financial change, what we used to call in the good old days the reset, and of course Charlie Ward is quite rightly an expert on this, and I do like talking to Charlie. We get on very well. Charlie Ward has a true and genuine understanding and knowledge, particularly in relation to financial change. And when President Trump is talking about smooth transfer of power, he's also referring away from the current banking system to a new system. The one that President Kennedy was attempting to put in and was murdered for it. President Kennedy was not murdered because he was about to release UFO redacted documents. He was going to release a lot of UFO stuff, but that wasn't the reason they murdered him. They murdered him because he was about to put America back on the gold standard, and there were certain people that weren't prepared to have that. And so here we are again, 50 years plus now, looking at the same thing, and this transfer will be a remarkable transfer for humanity. And finally, so much info comes into me, and I'm sorry I can't put it in a nice even order. Just an ordinary guy working from home. Don't have a big office, we don't have a big staff. We're not, I don't sit round, and as I'm not a researcher, so I don't sit down looking at 50 presentations, make notes and put it all together. I meet people. It's difficult at the moment with bloody lockdown, but I meet people, or I get messages, and I report to you what I am being told, not what I am researching from other people. And I understand that 34 quintillion was seized from the Vatican Bank. Now then, I don't know if that's dollars, pounds, euros. I didn't ask. If that 34 quintillion is electronic money, it's worthless. If it's 34 quintillion in paper money, it's worthless. If it's 34 quintillion in gold, if there ever was that amount of money, that's very valuable. However, I think it's 34 quintillion electronically that is backed against physical assets. That means it is valuable. So if it's 34 quintillion backed against a physical asset that may not necessarily be gold, then that is actually a realistic currency. This money is being gathered and got ready. I do believe America will go to the gold standard. I hope to goodness Britain goes back on the gold standard. I hope many countries do. But that will change the way you are charged interest, and I am charged interest by the banks or credit card companies or whoever it is. You go and buy a motor car, and you've got to pay extra interest on that. That is going to change. And the way that people are taxed, you go for a job, you pay tax. That's going to change too. Do you know, British people know this, but most people don't know, that tax in Great Britain is illegal. It was brought, I don't know if it was Mad King George, but one of the kings wanted a war. Ancient Britain was always fighting wars, and he didn't have enough money, so he had this fantastic idea to charge a penny in the pound on tax on people's money that they were paid wages, we call income tax. I don't know what you call it in your other countries. And it was never ratified into law except that 1 year. And do you know, in the British Parliament, the British lawmakers, the first thing they enact every time they have a new parliament is to re-pass this law. Every time. It's the very first law they pass, that we will approve the raising of taxes for the government. Well, if we get this financial change, things like that are not going to sit so well with the new concept. And so I think we are looking at a new freedom. So it's not just about President Trump or the Republicans and the Democrats. It's not, in its narrow sense, just good and evil. It's about the flowering and the development of humanity. Because how in the name of the Lord can you flower and develop when you are being crushed on every side by the system? You know, most of us, we do a job, whatever that job is, we get money, and then all the system wants is to come in and take that off you until you're left with that much. And you look at it and you think, yeah, but I've got a phone, I've got a car, I want to buy food, I've got to pay for heating, I've got to have clothes. And that's the system that so many people don't understand that there is an alternative. It's what they were born into. It's what they've grown up to, and their parents were born into it, and their grandparents. And instead of saying this is wrong, they say, oh, well, that's the way it is. What can I do about it? I'm just one person. The point is, what we can do is support those who want to fight against that. In American history and in British history, predominantly black people were created as slaves. They were made as slaves, and they were treated horrendously by those who lorded it over them. And then the anti-slavery, the abolition of slavery was passed, and these people no longer worked for nothing. And let's come forward to 2020, 2021. We work and we're paid. So we're paid slaves. We are still working for our lords and masters. But because things have changed, we're now getting paid for that slavery. So let nobody think, amongst the vast majority of us ordinary people, that we have much freedom. We don't. And this government's response to the virus has shown us that actually our freedoms are wafer thin, and they're in our concept, or they're in a book, or they're in a big document locked away in a museum. But to the modern politico, that is valueless, because we are purely here to feed the machine of continuity. And what is changing now in humanity is that people don't want to be paid slaves anymore. They want something better. And so, we must fight against the media. We must fight against, and I say fight just for avoidance of doubt. I don't mean kicking a gun. I mean, we must fight morally. God, you've got to be so careful at the moment on this planet. We must be sure that we don't give in. We don't fall at the last hurdle. We have to believe that we're right. That's it. So these are exciting times. They're very difficult times. I don't care if everyone around you thinks you're mad or thinks you're crazy. Just hold on and wait. And if it all goes the way it needs to go, and we want it to go, then you can say to these people, why do you think, you could say you as I, why do you think I saw the truth and you didn't? I don't want you to say, I told you so, though I expect lots of you will. But what you can say is, why do you think I saw through it all and you didn't? And you can say to them, go and ask yourself, take yourself off and think for a week. Why is it that you didn't see the truth? Why didn't you? What is it that stopped you seeing the truth? And do you know what? Once we get all this, nobody will ever laugh at any of you again. Nobody will say you're crazy or a conspiracy theorist. Nobody will hold that against you. And when you speak, people will listen to you. Because in this sea of madness, there are a few people, there's many millions of you, but there are billions of people who don't listen. There are many millions of you who actually have got it right. And like you, the big game for me is mainstream media. Oh, what a joy to see that come down. What a joy for that to be out and the truth to come out and then to be re-established back on, and you can proudly go out into your communities and look people in the face and say, well, of course, I knew it. That's why I know so many of you are really, really wanting this to happen. And I do understand that. And I have, for what it's worth, I have taken that message to the very people who make those decisions. I have done that. And I've told you that the response back, it wasn't very friendly. It was, we will do what we need to do. We cannot have our timelines changed just because, people want some action, but they do understand. So I did put the viewpoint across. I had to put it because I want that. I want that to happen too. I just want justice. I want the bad people held to account. No matter what it is, I want them held to account, and I want good to triumph over evil, because that's what good people believe in. Right. Thank you very much for your time. God bless.